Welcome everybody to another episode of Chocolate Travels. I'm Joseph with Bean to Bar World, and I'm here with Katrien from Silva Cacao. So nice to meet you.
Hi, Joseph. Nice to meet you too. And thanks for having me.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm really excited to learn and hear from your experiences. You work really closely with cacao growers and as well as chocolate makers. So you have a very unique perspective on this industry. So let's start off by finding out what drew you into fine cacao. Were you familiar with fine chocolate before, and that's how you got into it? How did you get into creating this company?
Okay. Well, in fact, this is like many things in life, a coincidence and a non-coincidence, let's say. I've been working for a very long time, well, relatively long time, since 2008 in coffee. And the time that I started in coffee, in fact, it was still a lot of, let's say, brewing coffee in the can, and the sink would be the biggest consumer. But then, yeah, the coffee, I would say, industry developed a lot towards more qualities, better controlling qualities, more value for the farmers. And I've been working for more than 10 years for a coffee trading company, family-based coffee trading company, to really develop more value and bring it back to the farmers based on quality, based on traceability, and based on certification. Of course, a very important component of that was taste and flavor development and experimenting to bring better flavors to coffee roasters. And in fact, that has been my inspiration to apply the same notion of quality and notion of transparent way of working in cacao. And so I started investigating a bit, and I was so shocked, in fact, that the craft chocolate scene was so small. And I was really convinced that cacao was behind compared to coffee. And that's what I wanted to push. And that's where the idea came from to start my own company with Silva Cacao.
Okay. So what made you look at cacao? If you were so involved in coffee, why the interest in cacao?
Well, in fact, very coincidentally, we were on holidays visiting one of my best friends in South Africa. And we were doing many wine tastings and also chocolate tastings. And in fact, I got quite intrigued on the potential of flavor. And yeah, I'm based in Belgium. And, you know, of course, Belgium is a huge a chocolate country, so known quality chocolates. But the truth is that it's totally not the case. And that, in fact, few people were definitely in Belgium, which is still, let's say, almost our smallest market. We're totally not into this let's say, optimal use of flavor potential. And so coincidentally, I came into touch with different cacaos, different tasting, and like applying the taste concept of chocolate on the different origins, the different qualities, and so on. And I was so triggered by this that I started investigating, and basically from that moment, I started building a business plan. And yeah, I would say about 1 year later, I launched the company.
That's amazing. So I have a couple questions now in my head. So one is, why do you think it's in Belgium, where people love chocolate, it's known for chocolate, why is the craft or bean to bar industry sort of lacking there? Do you have any ideas why that might be?
Well, meanwhile, we do have some craft makers, but I think how should I say? I think when people are convinced that something is there, and like Belgium has really and has done on certain aspects, I would say a great job in promoting chocolate. But people were convinced that Belgian chocolate is good. So maybe they were not so much searching for better, because the idea or the perception was there that it's good. And while in some, I would say, more traditional markets like France or Italy, this artisanal aspect of making chocolate from bean to bar, it's not from the last 10 years. It's there already for many more decades with the family companies that have been doing that. And in Belgium, the history is not there of this bean to bar, let's say, approach. So there was, I would think, little foundation, and also because of many more industrial players that are present here, the offering of a bulk chocolate that has the label of Belgian quality chocolate was there. So I think people were maybe not so curious to
It's a
discover
really
something
good point.
better.
Yeah, yeah. It's we already have the best
When you have
chocolate
the
in the world.
yeah.
Yeah. Why do we
And
need
when you
to
have
look
the
for anything else?
curiosity to discover a product, you're going to research it and you're going to look for something better. But when
Right.
you have in your mind, we have it something very good, the curiosity might be different as well to look for something better.
Yeah. No, that's a
That's
very
my
good point.
assumption.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And it's interesting that you compare it to France and Italy too, where there have been smaller family-run businesses that are, maybe grown over the years, but have been there for generations. Whereas Belgium,
Exactly.
I'm sure that happened a long time ago, but the larger industry companies essentially swallowed them up a long time ago before anyone alive can
Exactly.
remember, right? So you don't have
Yeah.
that. And another quick
Exactly.
question is, what do you appreciate more now, coffee or cocoa beans?
Well, we still appreciate both. We have like this saying, like in our house, no bad chocolate enters, no bad coffee enters, and no bad wine
Wow.
enters. So we use the same concept for the different products we buy. So
You're,
no, I have a love for both products still, and I think there are both products where you can really drive change by managing in a different way. So
mhm, wonderful. And the slogan for Silva Cacao is cacao with an identity. So can you explain what you mean by this?
yeah, so it comes in fact from I would say not the idea, but the observation that most of the people on this planet choose chocolate based on a color. It's like I choose dark chocolate, I choose white chocolate, or I choose milk chocolate. And they don't have any knowledge of what's behind this. I compare it a bit, yeah, it's to joke around, a bit like it would be like you go to a garage and what kind of car do you want? You can give me a black one. It doesn't it
It's a
doesn't
good
say
idea. Right.
anything, right?
Yeah.
It's like completely ridiculous. And so the whole concept behind Silva Cacao is to really be the connection between farmers who are like really working super hard to make a good product and chocolate makers. And we want to share that information in between. And so we want to move totally away from the image of the choosing the chocolate on the color, but really like choosing the chocolate on identity. And the identity is for me not just like the geographical identity, like where it comes from, but it's really like the whole identity. This means the flavor identity, the farmers behind, the geography, the post-harvesting. So the whole set of information that can complement to the final product to really like reveal this together with the cocoa beans.
No, that's a really good point. And I mean, you see that reflected a lot in the craft chocolate world, and it seems like a lot of makers are trying to not just talk about country identity of the cacao, but co-ops and people involved in it as well. Do you feel that, I'm assuming you've connected with them, do you think that farmers like that? Do farmers or growers or co-ops or whoever, do they like the fact that people know who they are too as well? Does that matter to them?
Well, from my observation and from the farmer organizations with whom they work, they do like it because if you, of course, we have like indeed, as you mentioned, a kind of unique position in the value chains because we see both ends on a daily basis. Let's say we are daily into contact with many farmer organizations and as well with many chocolate makers. And of course, and this is amazing, the tendency is that chocolate makers really want to know a lot of information about the product. And that's amazing. So they want to know where the beans are coming from, what is the post-harvesting, what is the location, who is growing it, what is the forest area. So many elements of information. But on the other hand, the farmers, you have to imagine like most of the farmers on this planet are just selling their beans to a few big companies because it's an oligopoly that we're in. And basically they have no clue what happens with their product. So if you start working with some of the farmers groups like in Uganda, in Congo, their beans never reached the specialty market. So we literally started from scratch, and after a few years work, these beans were brought to the specialty market. But if you then go back to the fields and you bring these bars made by amazing chocolate makers with chocolate awards, with international recognitions, and really that you could see and taste that it's an amazing product, and their name is on that package, it really makes them proud. And it's not just talking about like, oh, was the price good, is a forester, it's just like this feeling of appreciation. And I think it's very valuable to to share it to both ends, the information of the beans to the chocolate makers, but also to give an information back to the farmers, like what happens with their beans. And okay, not everybody in the craft chocolate team has the maybe interest or the opportunity to travel to origin, but those who do, and they could really like meet the farmers and give their products and let them taste, it creates a very unique connection, I would say. And it's if you know, it's the human part of things, but if you know with whom you're working and what you're doing, I think it brings an additional value to, even, you know, in life, there's always problems. And no supply chain is there that we have never a problem. We have problems all the time. But if you know each other, you understand each other, you understand each other's reality and context, it's much easier to find solutions as well.
Exactly,
And
because you have
cool thing.
The passion is there, the connection is there, the faces are there. So people are more, they have more energy to problem solve and to fix things when you know there's people behind on either end.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a really good point. And do you think that's important for consumers? Do you think they like to know? Do you think it's important for them from a marketing point of view? Is that information important for the consumer as well, not just the maker?
It's a very good question, and I wish I had the answer on that. In fact, I don't know. The real answer is I don't know. I wish the answer was yes, they're super interested, but in fact, I don't know.
Interesting.
Because purchase decisions go so quick, and I think many people. Okay, of course, I have mostly the view on, let's say, the Belgian purchase pattern or the European purchase pattern, but I think purchases go really quick. I do think that today there is more interest from consumers on what they are buying and where it comes from. I definitely think that there's a positive tendency, but at the end, I think that many consumers still buy to have a good feeling, and I don't know if they really want to know all that information. I think there's relatively few people who are really have the intrinsic motivation to really know a lot about the product.
Right.
So no, yeah,
I appreciate that. That's a fair response, and I would agree with you there with a lot of that. But it would be, I think it's some of our job is to get that consumer to rethink the way they think about food and think about chocolate, to maybe consider these things.
Yeah, nice. But it's a lot linked with education. I think just you can be interested if you know something about the product. Like compare with other sectors, like for example, clothes. If you never taught how it's made or from which country it comes, it's very difficult to take this criteria into your purchase decision. So I think this all starts with awareness and like it starts literally with the small kids in school.
Definitely.
If they would know from their start of education that in cocoa, this is the reality, this is the possibilities, this is the problems, this is what you can do with taste. I think the daily decisions you make in life are based on the best information that you have at that moment. But if you know very little, I think things go so quick that you just don't take it into account. So on that sense, I think we need to push a lot for better education and better awareness about the product.
Right. And it's a lot of work, because not only are you educating the public, but you have to convince them why they should be educated. You know, that's the hardest part too, I think.
Yeah, that's true. But still, I do think that's one interesting, which is more, let's say, fact-based. There were a few studies here in Europe on consumer behavior and like how interested are people to really pay more for, or what is their main reason why they would pay more for a product. And the conclusion was that even for environmental friendly products, everybody wants it. But from that study, only 10 to 15% was willing to pay a higher price for that. And the higher price they would be willing to pay would be also 10 to 15%. So it's very little. And in fact, a major reason why people are willing to pay more was quality. That was a very big driver, and the connection with the brand. So I think on that sense, these are really positive elements that could help us to really promote better chocolates, I believe.
And I think the quality aspect is important, because when it comes to ideas such as fair trade, where you have a lot of larger companies, whether it's coffee or chocolate or whatever, it's fair trade. It may or may not be fair trade. And if it is, the quality might be the same as commercial quality, right? So a lot of people sometimes, I think over the years, get a bit disillusioned because, you know, they want, yes, they want to help like different people at different levels of the food chain, so to speak, you know, in commerce there. But they also want to have something more. Like, why would I pay more for the exact same product, right? They want that quality. They want better flavor too. So
Yeah.
in some ways, some of the larger companies who deal with fair trade, I feel, have sort of damaged the reputation, because you can have both. You can have fair trade and really great quality too. But some people, they see the higher price and they say, well, it's just fair trade. It's not necessarily better quality. And that can turn some people off. So it's,
yeah, that's interesting what you say. It's so true. And I think we should really go for, let's say, the package deal where you say it's quality and more environmentally friendly. And I think this could be interesting to really create a new market, because indeed, fair trade, I don't want to say anything negative or so, but in the fair trade standard, there is no single parameter or requirement on quality. So probably you can have amazing lots of fair trade certified cacao, but you certainly have a lot conventional quality, but certified fair trade. So the one doesn't say anything about the other. And organic, in fact, it's the same. There is no quality requirements. There are a lot of, let's say, requirements on the ecological side, but there is not really a quality requirement.
Yeah, and I think the fine chocolate world is proving that you can do all. You can cover all those bases too. And I think getting that across to consumers will spark more of an interest. They'd be like, oh, okay, you know, it hits all those boxes and it's incredible flavor. I'd be willing to pay more for that, you know, because a lot of people want to help when they can. A lot of people want to give more. A lot of people want better life for other people. But people also have to consider, you know, their own spending and habits and all that sort of stuff. There needs to be a trade-off for them. So that's definitely something we need to think about more when it comes to educating people, the consumer. In what ways does the cacao you source tie into conserving and protecting cacao trees and forests?
You mean cacao trees in terms of genetics or in terms of biodiversity forest coverage?
Either one.
In one, okay. I would say it's one of the parameters which is for us the set of all parameters to look at when we look at sourcing. So quality is the starting point. If there is no talk about quality or no way how to differentiate a product based on quality, it's a no-go for us. But next to the quality parameters, we look at the social aspect, the human impact, and forest conservation. So for some of the origins, but of course, like forest conservation, biodiversity conservation, it are very complex topics, which mostly need to be seen at landscape level. So we try to be very realistic as well on that component, because if you work with one farm of 2 hectares, even if there is a lot of forest on that farm, to really make a change with that forest, it needs to be connected with other forest areas. So these are typically the topics, I would say, that you need a bit broader perspective or a landscape approach to do something meaningful with that. So we have a few projects where we're really like piloting, I would call it nature positive cacao, and not only like carbon neutral or carbon positive, but nature positive in the sense that forest is being conserved, forest is being restored and increased in the cocoa areas where we source, but also with the attention to go, I would say, beyond forest cover and really look at biodiversity, at different species, at the more holistic way of looking at nature. Because I found that there is a lot of bad communication on, oh, this cacao comes from agroforestry. First of all, what does it mean, agroforestry? There is a definition, but it's not because your farm has 3 planted shade trees that it is agroforestry. So what does it really mean? So we try to go a bit more deeper into the concept, which is not easy. And it's like already a kind of extra step, I would say. So we try to build partnerships with other organizations, be it NGO or environmental protection organizations, to really do something meaningful with good quality cacao, forest conservation, and understanding the complexity of this part.
Yeah, there's a lot of buzzwords out there that, again, can create confusion for consumers there. But it's nice to know that you're trying to really define them, be very specific about what you're talking about. You're not just trying to put out words that sound good. You actually have some substance behind it. You're doing the work behind it as well.
Yeah, and you need to be realistic as well. Like if you work with farmer organizations that start from the level of poverty, not having food for the family, the first question that you can make is not, can you please not cut down the trees? This is very, for me, very neo-colonial. You have to start from scratch and build it step by step according to the maturity of the organization, evolve towards something that works for them. And like in Ecuador, we have this, I would say, pilot project where we really try to say, okay, the farmer at the end has a limited amount of hectares. Let's say he has 5 hectares. You cannot ask, please don't cut down the 3 hectares of forest and just make your cultivation on the 2 hectares. He has kids running around, maybe 10, who also need a future. So the main concern for the farmer is, how can I make the lives of my kids better than what I have? This is the main question of everyone.
Right.
And then secondly, you can put extra requirements. So the point is, you have to find a model that works for the farmer. And you have to find a way how they can improve their lifestyles without cutting down forests or with even creating a positive impact on forest. And I think for that, you first need to make sure that you can improve and stabilize the family income. And once you reach that point, then you can go to the next step of forest conservation and protection, etc. So we always try to take into account really this farmer reality. And in some countries, I would say like in Guatemala, in Ecuador, we're relatively advanced on integrating this holistic concept of nature positive into the value chain. And for some other countries, like for example, Congo, it's a war zone. People are being killed every day. This is not the first point we're going to discuss. Even if we have a program running and we're looking for partnerships, etc., to make this, I would say, economically and nature viable, it is a thing, but you have to, I think it's our duty to really understand the farmers' reality and to find solutions together with them.
Right, exactly. People from different parts of the world definitely have different priorities of what's important to them, and you have to come to them in a way that's more empathetic, right? Meet them
exactly. And push through your requirements. First, it's very neo-colonial, I'll repeat it again. And secondly, I think it will not last for the future. So if it's a solution that really works for them, your chances that it will continue on the long run are much higher than if you push something through, which people do not like. So it might be a short-term solution, but at the end, you might end up with having more damage than at your starting point. So that's not what we want to do.
Yeah, you're not coming down at them and telling them what to do. You're sort of working alongside them and finding something sustainable, because that's what this craft chocolate world is all about, is sustainability in many aspects, business aspects, environmental aspects. If we want to keep it growing, it has to be sustainable. Otherwise, it's going to fall apart at some point. So very good points.
Exactly. And I think the first component, if I can complement on what you mentioned, I think the first component of sustainability is to create stability of income for the families. And that's a discussion that we often have with chocolate makers. And I believe, because it's true that today there's many nice cocos on the market, there's many projects, there's many new people popping up, sometimes popping up and going away again. But at the end, like if a chocolate maker commits to an origin, to a farmer, to a cooperative, and they continue to work with them, this creates stability for the farmers. And once you have a stable, it's the same for us. And once you have a stable income, you can go to the next level. But if you cannot secure this first component of sustainability, which is creating stable income for farmers, it's very difficult to bring in very complex topics like indeed deforestation and things like that, because it's their basic needs and that needs to be fulfilled first.
Right. A lot of farmers, I think, in many parts of the world, when they've maybe replaced their trees with other varieties that are not quite good, they do it not necessarily because they want to, but they have no choice, right? Like you said, they need a livelihood for themselves and their kids. So if you give them more choices, more ways of sustaining their livelihood without having to sort of destroy good quality cacao and that sort of stuff, they'll definitely be interested in it. But like you said, it has to work for them as well. So
exactly. Yeah, and you don't have to underestimate. There's many people coming to the field and unfortunately making sometimes false promises. And I think this is something we really see that
what do you mean by false promises?
Yeah, I don't know, like an organization that comes and that maybe asks, oh, let's work on these quality requirements, but then, for example, are not able to commercialize the cocos, which asking to do a lot of work, but then not be able to purchase the goods and bringing the value back.
Right.
It's a huge thing, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because there's some farmers out there that might say, no, like, give me the money first and then we'll talk about this. Whereas some of them are maybe very trusting. They put in all this work, they had expected something out of it, and then nothing happens. And in the future, they'll probably be less willing and open to try something again with somebody, right?
But quite some damage has been done on that field.
Yeah.
And we could see that.
And the sustainability, as far as makers consistently buying from a producer, that's very, very important too, because in the craft world, I understand as a growing chocolate maker, you start off with one or two origins, and then you come across another one that you like better, and you're like, I want to switch over. But then kind of doing that sort of thing where you switch from one cacao to another, you don't prop up the sustainability factor. You don't allow these farmers to have this steady income if makers are coming and going and it's kind of fluctuating in that way, right? We can't really have that. That's not really going to help in the long run. So your company focuses on your website, it says banning child labor and slavery connected to cacao that you source. So how can a consumer know if the fine chocolate bar that they're purchasing is connected to slavery or not? What should they know in order to avoid such products? I know that's kind of a big question, but what can consumers do?
It's indeed a very, I would say, complex topic. There's a lot of judgment on the topic, I would say. And we know that, in fact, I think there's on this planet, my belief is always that people try to do good. I believe always in the trust in people.
Optimistic.
The thing is, I think there's very few parents who are aiming to let their kids work on fields and doing jobs that they don't allow them to go to school or develop themselves. I think it's maybe some extremely crazy people, but it doesn't exist. So I think it's never like a purpose. That's already the first thing. So child labor is, and it's proven as well, this is a consequence of poverty, having no other choice than that. And in some countries, it needs to be contextualized as well. So in some countries, the rates, I would say, of child labor are very high, but then you have the different forms of child labor. Like, what is really child labor? It's like when I was a kid, I was helping my parents at a big garden with lots of fruits and vegetables. I was always helping them in the garden. This is not child labor. I went to school. It was on my holidays or in the weekend. So this is not child labor. So the question is already, what do we mean with child labor? Does it harm the kids? And there is a UN definition on that. So I think that's already quite straightforward to understand, like, what do we really mean with child labor? Does it block the development of the kids? Do they have no access to schooling, for example? Does it harm physically by tough labor or using dangerous products, some pesticides or things like that? So that's already one important thing. And secondly, we have to take into account that very often it's a consequence of poverty. So by paying better prices, consequently, and by providing, because that's also more, let's say, government linked and context linked, by providing schooling, and that's the government responsibility, you will eliminate the problem at the end. It's a development problem. So the value chains that we work in that case, we know how things are going locally, and we pay higher prices because it's a premium for quality that we work. So in that sense, we know the value chains and we know if there is really child labor in the worst firms or not. If you buy a bar in the supermarket, labels like fair trade, they have requirements on child labor. So I think in a way, if people want to buy consciously and their main concern is, I don't want to have child labor, okay, the most certain solution is to buy a product with a standard that bans child labor or has the purpose to do so.
Right. It's a touchy subject, for sure.
It's a touchy subject, and I found it very difficult because I know some chocolate makers are saying, oh, no, I don't buy from West Africa because it's always child labor. Well, first, it's not always. And secondly, that's maybe not the solution either. So again, the complexity of the topics is very, very big. I think the main hot potatoes are linked to a few countries. It's linked to access to schooling and it's linked to trafficking of kids often. So you need to understand the context. And I think we need to be smart enough to know that farmers do not have the intention to send the kids to the field and to do tough work that they cannot develop themselves. It's never or almost never the intention.
I think it's important, like you said, to define, because child labor, when people think that, they automatically think slave child labor, which is not always the case.
Exactly.
And, some people have a problem with, well, not, I think most people have a problem with slave labor. They don't want to hear that. And, in West Africa, for instance, where they, kidnap children from other countries, bringing them to Ivory Coast and forcing them to work, that's definitely something people don't want to support. But like you said, too, turning your back on a region because of that is not going to help either, right? That's something that always stuck with me, too, is that, in the craft chocolate world, it's very taboo to have cacao from Ghana, but especially Ivory Coast and that parts of the world there. And I'm thinking, well, if there's someone there who can develop a co-op and start growing really good cacao there, it shouldn't be taboo, because that's where the change is gonna happen. That's where the change is gonna start. It's in a way, it doesn't really help people in Ivory Coast by never buying cacao from Ivory Coast, right? There has to be some active progression there. There has to be some help there as well. And I think, like you said, too, is when it comes to child labor, in South America, for instance, there's some families, some places where they know their kids are going to inherit the farm. They're going to continue to grow cacao. That's what's going to happen. They know that. And so, it for them, it makes more sense for their children to be spending a lot of time on the farm and learning and growing in that sense as well. So it's a topic that can't really say is black and white, right or wrong. It's very complex.
Exactly. And in fact, you can even look a bit broader. In fact, what would be very interesting, because for many countries that are a bit more developed, for example, some Latin American countries, what we see is that, let's say, youngsters are not so interested anymore to work in agriculture or in farming. And maybe they don't have, because having a cocoa farm is often linked to poverty. And sadly enough, it's often the reality. So if, for example, more innovation in cocoa farming, better qualities, better post-harvest techniques, like a way to bring up the level of technology, productivity, quality, be integrated, for example, in schooling programs from very young. And I think this would also help to give like these different type of dynamics to tackle it from a different point of view, you see, because if child labor is a consequence of poverty, we need to make sure that the transfer of knowledge is there to make farming more attractive, more productive. Right. Why do we have to talk about, let's say, minimum income? Minimum income is not good. We need like prosperous farms where you can have a good and decent living from cocoa. I think that's the situation that we have to target for. But for that, you need also knowledge, and even you can say quality, of course. For us, this is a starting point. But if you have what we see, for example, now in certain regions in Peru, where there was huge floodings and the flowering was completely destroyed. So the farms have 20% of the volume they have normally. Even if you pay triple price, you don't cover for the 80% loss. So making these farms more resilient, not only on producing quality, but also on productivity, on finding good techniques to make the farm sustainable and so on. It's a total concept, no? But you need knowledge, you need technology, we need much better tools to really develop and invest in the agricultural side of things.
Yeah. I know that's happening in places like Mexico too, where, the mentality is, and it has been for a long time, even my grandparents, they were poor farmers too. And they got so mad when I was a kid and I said I wanted to be a farmer. They're like, no. Like, you're not.
But you deserve something better, right? But
yeah,
why should we
that's the mentality.
Pejorative?
Yeah, we didn't come to Canada so that you can become a farmer. It's like, that's the mentality they have in some of these developing countries. So, but at the same time, a lot of them would be, if a lot of the children don't see it as an option and they move away from that, then who's going to grow that really good cacao? Who's going to sustain and keep up what's been developed so far? So you need to have, like you said, incentive, better technology, better education that gives them much more reason to be there,
reason and hope as well, that it's possible to have a good living from from the cacao fields, no?
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes, because then what could you have is like, okay, we don't like the farming, so we go to the cities. But often poverty in cities is even worse than on the countryside.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think in whether it's the farmers, whether it's the chocolate makers, a lot of people nowadays, they want more purpose out of their careers, out of their jobs, out of their daily lives, you know? So if farmers are growing really great cacao that's used for chocolate that's winning awards and they can feel proud about it, they love that, you know? And if there's small artisan makers that can be entrepreneurs and create incredible chocolate in the way they want, they're very satisfied with that as well. And I think that's a better world to live in, where people are proud of the work that they do and are working together in harmony that sort of continues to prop each other up, as opposed to everybody working for large multinational companies that are just sort of like a little peg, you know, a little gear that don't really get much meaning out of it, you know, if that makes sense. Sounds like
it makes completely sense. And I think that's nice to combine both ends and to have indeed a job that they like and to have fun out of it and to have a good living out of that. I think it's great.
Yeah, at all levels of the industry. It is great that chocolate makers can purchase cacao from transparent sources, but what needs to happen in areas where this is still a problem? So we kind of covered this a little bit, but who can make real improvements here and how can they make these improvements? So, you know, like we said earlier, you kind of source cacao where sort of slave labor is not happening. But from your point of view, even though this is a big question, what sort of things need to be done to help the problem areas?
Yeah, good and difficult question though. But I think there's a lot of levels of complexity in these topics. And even if you can change, I don't say easily, but relatively easily things at a micro scale. But to really make change for the long run, I think you need kind of system change, if this makes sense. And I think that you cannot do this alone. So for my maybe ideal world, I think that more organizations needs to collaborate to reach certain purposes. And that's whether like, okay, if you, for example, you take the example that we were discussing, let's say we have a farm in Ghana doing amazing work on quality. We can find markets to better commercialize the products, to bring premiums back to farmers. It's already a challenge in Ghana, but okay. Assume we can, but then you need the government as well to take the responsibility to provide schooling. You need a strong environmental legislation to make sure that there's a local control on not cutting down forests and things like that. So I think these we need to think more into networks of people with different targets is maybe a bit too tough word, but like different purposes,
niche
different objectives, and different niche, but to come a bit out of your micro scale and look a bit broader and just see, hey, how can we maybe work together to work towards the same direction? And that could last much longer. So that's a bit the way how I see things, let's say, because again, some topics are so complex that even, okay, I think the reality of a craft chocolate maker, it's a small size. So you cannot impact the whole world. And it's good to make small steps. And that's what we need. Little by little, we need to see that the steps get more coordinated. For us, it's the same. We are a tiny fish in big chocolate land. So everybody has to do their part of the job, but I think we need to dare to look a bit broader. And it doesn't mean we have to do everything by ourselves. And it doesn't mean that the chocolate makers have to do everything by themselves, neither the farmer. But if we look a bit further, maybe we could find partnerships that bring the value from different angles, if you see what I mean.
Right. Like you mentioned, if you're talking about education in Ghana, for instance, then you would have to incorporate people who have nothing to do with cacao and chocolate, but have to do with education and sort of tie that in somehow, working together with them. So it's like you have all these little droplets and finding a way to pull them together to create a bigger
Yeah,
change.
but
Yeah.
this it sounds like kind of easy, but it really, I think it requires a mind shift, because you need to think in networks of people rather than into a kind of top-down system where you put the responsibility on the end of one person or one company. Like even companies have also an economic reality, right? The chocolate maker has an economic reality. You cannot, for example, pass the bill of everything linked to the cocoa beans to the chocolate maker, because they also have their business to run. Same
Right.
counts for us. And so everybody has their, I would say, limitation as well in their scope of action. But with the different purposes together, maybe there is more synergy possible.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, we need less big egos, and we need to find another way of working together, you know.
Right. Right.
So many challenges on that end.
Mhm. Has your view on the cacao industry changed since you first started? And if so, in what ways? So from when you started getting into cacao to today, can you think of anything that has really shifted in your views?
I think like drastically shifted not, but I do believe we still have a long way to go. And I think maybe I was a bit more hopeful that it would move quicker, I would say. But the complexity of things is so embedded in the value chain that it's really tough, and it takes time. So maybe I was a bit, I'm a bit more, I would say, realistic now on, doing it really step by step. And even, you cannot change the world from one day to the other, right? So even in our micro scale, which is small, how can we make steps and be grateful and satisfied with the steps we make, even if it doesn't change the whole system, and even if we try to little by little go towards that. I think that's definitely a change. And then maybe a second one is like, I would have hoped maybe that the education on quality chocolate would go quicker. I found it, compared to other food, I found it so
Very
slow.
slow.
Man,
Very
just
slow.
learn to taste. How difficult can it be? You're paying a whole hell of money for a vineyard for this grape. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
You go to whatever the gasoline station on the side of the road, and it's not a problem to buy a sandwich of €10 or $10. But you cannot
That's a good
pay
point. That's a good
an
point.
$8 for an amazing chocolate bar. So that I found maybe a bit frustrating. And I find the educational level of consumers on chocolate, it's to cry.
Yeah.
It's so much work on that end. And maybe there I'm shocked, because in coffee we are much more educated. At least even if you go to the supermarket, I won't say you have the top end craft lots, no. But at least you have relatively better qualities in coffee in a more accessible chain like a supermarket than chocolate.
Yes.
Chocolate, and even if you buy a Tanzania bar in an origin bar in a supermarket, it's still defects and extremely bad taste. So that's maybe a reality shock.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. And I think that's sort of what I try and focus on over the years is just the general public, like people who don't know anything about chocolate, don't really have any interest. Those are the people I really want to try and shift their minds. But that's the hardest. It's easy to convince people who want to spend more money on chocolate, who already love fine chocolate. Like that's easy. That's not. But how do you get the general public, people who are willing, like you said, to spend money on wine and coffee, but chocolate doesn't even faze them, right? So how do you get that? And that's challenging. I'm sure there's a few reasons. Wine is alcoholic, coffee has caffeine. Like there's these adult features in these products, whereas chocolate doesn't necessarily seem sophisticated enough or adult to the general public yet. But that's definitely going to have to change. Yeah.
But in any case, in that sense, it's amazing that you're doing so much, I would say, educational work and trying to raise awareness with consumers, because that's really what we
my
need
goal.
To make them understand.
And after all these years, it still feels like day one to me sometimes with the people I encounter that know like absolutely nothing. It's like, wow, after all these years, because there's other people doing this too. And it's like the public just doesn't know anything about chocolate, so we're going to need something bigger to get people's attention, to start paying attention. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's maybe not the most popular idea that I'm going to express now, but I'm
Oh,
still going to do it. Like in the sector of coffee, the way how coffee got much more into the attention was via Starbucks. And
I
they
was just
kind of
gonna, yeah,
made the product much more sexy. Of course, it's linked with an experience in a bar, but also the origins were put in front. And again, I don't say anything about quality. It's their style of preparing. It's not
right,
personally my favorite style,
right,
but they really brought a lot of attention to the product coffee, to origin, to quality, a bit to farmers level. They made it interesting to have bars. And of course, with chocolate, we don't have this, I would say, sharing moment, but you could have with a coffee. It's like you would go for a beer or you could go for a coffee, but you have this sharing moment. And of course, we don't have that with cacao. But I do think that in a way, now sometimes it feels like there's the industry and there's the craft sector, but there's like nothing in between. And I do believe that if you really want to drive change, there always will be industrial products. It's for
right.
everything. There is crappy
Yeah.
wine, there is
Yeah.
crappy coffee, and there will be crappy chocolate anytime. It
Yeah.
will not disappear from the market because there is always a consumer group that wants a cheap price, the sweet bomb, and that's it.
Yeah.
So it will always be there. But if imagine that we can raise the bar in every segment and sector, and you have niche sector that grows and that becomes bigger compared to today, but you also have the industry that has their different type of product lines, which is already a bit the case today, but even raise the bar on the higher end segments, let's say, I think this can create change. And it should not be one or the other, but maybe it should be in all segments, like literally keep raising the bar.
Right. No, I was gonna mention that earlier, but I didn't because I thought the same thing. People aren't gonna like it, but there's pros and cons to this idea of Starbucks making chocolate more, sexy and approachable for a lot of people. There's good and bad in that, but I do agree with the fact that it really sort of, especially in countries like North America and whatnot, it really sort of heightened the bar for, paying attention to things like fair trade and high quality and things like that as well. And I feel like in some ways, in a good way, fine chocolate needs to go a bit more mainstream, and I worry about that because, I already see a lot of, I always encourage anyone who wants to make chocolate, be a chocolate maker, do it. I think the more, the better. But you also, over the years, I've seen a lot of chocolate makers that I feel like are not really doing a very good job with the chocolate. But, I want to encourage the ones who are doing a really good job, but that's such a small niche. That's such a small percentage. And I think you need to have this mainstream, whether it's one company, many companies, whatever, like mainstream craft chocolate that just kind of becomes more public, it gets people's attention. I think we need that. And I can see positive and negative effects of that, but I really think that needs to happen in some level,
Yeah, and I think there will always be a group of people searching for the best. And
Right.
it's just a matter of like developing the best on a higher standard, right? So I think every type of product has a niche segment, and the more popular a product becomes, the more space to grow the highest quality segment. Like if you're comparing coffee, I don't know the latest figures, but I think FCIA published a bit like around 1% is craft chocolate. It's very small, if you look at coffee, cheese, wine, beer. Like how cool is craft beer today? Like in Belgium, we have more than 700 breweries, microbreweries. It's amazing. Like all this diversity of craft makers, and people look for it. If you go in a bar, you would, oh, this is a special beer of the country.
Yeah.
So there is definitely, I think this will, you can look at the dark side, let's say, and think like if the industry also develops, there would be less piece of the cake for us, let's say, but I don't think it's true. I think it's the contrary. I think it will develop more because there will be more people looking at criteria of quality, being positively critical on tasting, and looking for something better, even if it's something better for a special moment and let's say an upgrade commercial quality for the day-to-day. That's also fine. At least there is this attention for the product and more conscious choices within the purchase decision. And I think today it's not fully, but almost fully lacking.
Yeah. We really need to shift the way consumers the culture of chocolate, the way consumers view chocolate. Like you said, sharing wine, sharing whatnot needs to be happen with chocolate. At my tasting room, I want people to come in, buy 1 or 2 bars, sit in the tasting room, enjoy it with their friend. And I tell people, yeah, come do that. But it's not in their head yet, like
No.
it makes more sense to go get a coffee together, not to sit
Yeah.
and have a chocolate bar together. So it's going to take some time. And like
It
you said,
will.
it has to be alluring, it has to be kind of sexy in a way for people to kind of get on board with it. I think that has to happen.
Or in gifting, like for example, in the Asian cultures, you see a lot of chocolate for gifts, but you wouldn't dare to arrive with a bad chocolate, right? So it could be in different ways, and maybe the product is not like that you have this sharing moment that you could have with a beer or with a coffee, but maybe there's other, let's say, moments of appreciation where quality could play a role.
Right. Wonderful. Such good ideas. Really, really nice to talk to you. Last question. What do you wish to see happen in the bean to bar world? What do you want to see happen next? I think we already covered it, but I'll ask you again.
Yeah, we covered quite some things. I would love to see the bean to bar chocolate world growing. And I think there's still a lot of room to grow. It's not easy. It's not easy. And the day-to-day reality of craft chocolate makers is often not easy. I think it's a complex product. There's a lot of investment for a whole machine line and things like that.
Very high cost.
Yes, relatively high overhead costs, but I would love to see it representing a bigger part of the cake of chocolate fans.
Wonderful. And what's the best way for people to connect with Silva Cacao? Who do you sell to? Where do you ship? How can people get a hold of you?
We love to talk chocolate, so mostly we are by the phone. We love to really understand. We're not on the phone with farmers. We're not on the phone with chocolate makers, just to understand a bit like what we can do for you. And you can just give us a call or an email, drop a line, and let's plan a conversation. And we're based in Belgium, so our stock is here based in Antwerp, but we also work with some amazing chocolate makers around the globe for exports.
Wonderful.
But mostly on the European markets.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It was a really pleasure to talk to you. A lot of good ideas out there. So
likewise, lovely to speak to you. And again, my congratulations for your amazing work that you're doing on education. We follow you, we read you, we get a lot of positive inspiration from you as well. So
thank you. Wonderful. Well, you keep doing what you're doing. Well, let's all keep doing it, and hopefully we'll see a lot of change in the future.
Sounds like an amazing plan.
Okay, Katrien. Thank you. Take care. All the best.
Bye.
Download the free Bean to Bar app to connect with incredible chocolate makers from around the world. Also, be sure to visit beantobarworld.com, your portal for all things fine chocolate, virtual tastings, free learning resources, research, and much more. Subscribe to the newsletter to stay in touch and donate to the free app and free resources here. Contact me for any chocolate-related questions you may have.